Back in the 90s, Capcom was on the top of the world when it came to Street Fighter games. Street Fighter 2 was a worldwide phenomenon, and the alpha games were doing great as well. Inevitably though, it was time to move on, and in came the Street Fighter 3 series, the next evolution of the franchise starting with New Generation in 1997. Capcom went all in on shaking up everything for Street Fighter 3, even going as far as introducing a brand new protagonist. Meet Alex, Street Fighter 3's main character. He's huge, he's a wrestler, and he's somehow 18 as of Street Fighter 3. Yeah, right. What's next? You're gonna tell me that this guy is 27? So, as any Street Fighter fan would have wondered in 1997, who exactly is Alex? Alex's lore would give insight into who he is, so it's best to start there. Putting this on a timeline of sorts, it all starts before the events of New Generation, where Alex joins a tournament and makes it all the way to the finals where he faces Balrog. Alex ends up winning by knocking out Balrog, as you can see here. Fast forward a bit, and now we're in New Generation, where Alex's father figure Tom gets brutally beaten by a man known as Gil. This angers Alex, and he wants to take revenge on Gil, so our favorite New Yorker then joins the world tournament after finding out it's being hosted by him. Alex makes it all the way to the finals, where he ends up facing Gil, and despite winning this fight, Alex decides to spare Gil's life, who ends up taking an interest in Alex. Our hero then heads back home to find a recovered Tom and happy Patricia, who's Alex's sister figure and Tom's daughter. Alex reflects on what he's learned during his time in the tournament, and he decides that his next objective is to seek out the strongest fighters, leading up to his story in Third Strike. However, something important to note is that at some point in Second Impact, Alex meets Hugo, his wrestling rival. Besides that, there's not a lot on Second Impact because Alex's arcade mode is the same as New Generation. Now on to Third Strike. Not much happens here besides Alex meeting Ryu and losing, before later re-encountering him for a rematch. Alex's story ends on an open-ended note, as there's no confirmation to who won the rematch, and that wraps up Alex's lore. What, did you expect more wacky adventures with Alex and friends? Silly viewer, you'll get more Shadowloo plotlines, and you'll enjoy it. Since the Street Fighter 3 series is the latest when it comes to Alex's lore, that means it'll be continued once he releases for Street Fighter 6, assuming it'll be moved forward at all given the current focus of Street Fighter 6's story. Moving things along, a more important aspect of Alex is how he plays. Alex is a pretty unique character, as his play style is a mix between rushdown and grappling, with some charge inputs sprinkled into his moveset. His specials start with his slash elbow, a charge input slide that can help him move quickly. His other charge input move is his stomp, where he stomps on you. Alex also has his flash chops, which are pretty good for combos and turning your opponent around. If you use Alex's power bomb command grab on an opponent who's turned around, then it'll turn into a backdrop rather than the usual power bomb animation. That isn't his only command grab though, as Alex has another one called Spiral DDT, where he grabs you and brings you to the ground. Moving on to anti-air options, Alex has a dragon punch, which I like referring to as the flying knee. Besides the knee, he has two more anti-air options in the form of his down heavy punch and lariat, and so to round out his notable moves, he has his headbutt, which is a back and heavy punch, and his dive, which is a down and heavy punch, but in the air. Moving into super territory, Alex has a total of 3 supers, just like every character in the Street Fighter 3 series. Super Art 1 is the Hyper Bomb, which is done with a full circle motion and the punch. Alex throws you around a lot before going for a huge dunk. I hope she has good medical insurance. Super Art 2 is Boomerang Raid, which is done with 2 forward quarter circles and a punch. For this animation, Alex smacks you around a whole lot before going for a final backdrop. Super Art 3 is Stun Gun Headbutt, which shares the same input method as Boomerang Raid. Alex grabs you for this super and repeatedly bangs his head into you, somehow giving you a bigger headache than fighting Mai on Street Fighter 6. As cool as these supers look, they're unfortunately some of Alex's weakest points. Super Art 2 is considered his best super out of the bunch, but even then, if your spacing is off, then it's gonna whiff mid-combo. Needless to say, Alex is a huge departure from Ryu's Shoto style. The only thing they have in common is a dragon punch motion, but even so, Alex's flying knee works differently from a Shoryuken. So, now it's time to ask, what makes Alex a failed protagonist? Despite having a cool design and cool looking moves, I'd say the biggest problem is that Alex was an unfamiliar character in an unfamiliar game. I mentioned earlier earlier in the video that Street Fighter 2 was a worldwide phenomenon at this point, and the alpha games were well liked, so people were expecting Street Fighter 3 to be similar. Unfortunately, it wasn't what people were expecting at all, and an even bigger turnoff was the fact that the roster only had 2 returning characters out of all the fan favorites established in previous Street Fighter games. This caused people to just stick with Street Fighter 2 or Alpha, leaving people who enjoyed Street Fighter 3 to their own devices. Another reason why Alex failed as a protagonist could be how much more difficult his playstyle is compared to Ryu. All you needed to know to get going with Ryu was Fireball, Tatsumaki, and an anti-air. Alex on the other hand takes a bit more brain power due to being a rushdown grappler hybrid, and to make matters worse, some of his inputs would be harder to execute for a newcomer, like his charge moves. Even looking onto the side of professional players in competitive Street Fighter, Alex hasn't been super popular due to just being a bad character in his own series. Fortunately, despite these and any other potential reasons that went into Alex's initial flop, that didn't translate into how people would perceive him in the future. Nowadays, he's well liked alongside other Street Fighter 3 characters, and Alex himself is a fan favorite. Since his debut, we next see Alex playable in Street Fighter 5 as DLC for Season 1, where he's younger and inexperienced. I was originally gonna talk more about Alex in Street Fighter 5, but I decided to just keep the video about him in Street Fighter 3. He's also been in a few crossover games, such as Capcom vs Tatsunoko, the cancelled 3D fighting game Capcom Fighting All-Stars, and he has a costume themed after him in Street Fighter Cross Tekken. I don't think I'm forgetting anything important. Outside of actual fighting games, we've seen Alex in adapted material such as Udon Street Fighter comics or the Ryu Final manga. We're slated to see him next in Street Fighter 6 during the early spring, and I seriously can't wait to have him back. Even though Alex isn't in the spotlight anymore, I'll always think that he's an awesome character and the best protagonist to me. With all that said, I've been Mystic Ramen, and keep on grinding.